Human sacrifice is a noble tradition that has been going on since the dawn of civilization. Whether it's to make your king happy, appease the gods, or just a creative way of getting rid of an annoying neighbor, you can bet that a classic heart-stealing, skull-splitting sacrifice will get the job done. So let's take a look at how different societies used to willingly depopulate themselves for the greater good. Imagine you spend most, if not all of your life serving one guy. The Pharaoh. Well, one day he just keels over from choking on a scarab and you say to yourself, oh thank God, your years of servitude are over. Only to find out that the Pharaoh handpicked you and your buddies to serve him in the afterlife. To make matters worse, you look around to see all of your bros celebrating like Ra himself just showed up to the party. Are you fucking kidding me? You say to yourself as a sword is rammed into your delicate tummy. Your body is then mummified and you're entombed with Pharaoh and the boys for all eternity. This is basically how retainer sacrifices went. Since pharaohs were seen as gods in human form, they were treated as such, requiring countless servants to tend to their every need. Like a lot of civilizations, ancient Egyptians believed in an afterlife where you could continue to do what you do without the fragility of mortality. Of course, pharaohs didn't want to spend eternity having to do things themselves. That's for poor people. So there were instances where pharaohs would arrange to have servants or even close family members sacrifice to accompany them into the next life. Evidence shows that those chosen for eternal untipped servitude willingly gave their lives as a sign of everlasting devotion to their pharaoh. Dumbasses. Examination of the bodies showed no signs of struggle or trauma, suggesting that they most likely cast themselves into the shadow realm sipping on an arsenic brewski. Retainer sacrifices were rare, and some of the only evidence of its practice dates back to the first dynasty of Egypt around 3000 BC, but it has also been seen in other ancient cultures like Sumerians and Chinese, though the practice seemed to have faded in popularity as time went on. My guess is the pool for volunteers dried up once they realized they could just be like, yeah, sure Pharaoh, we'll be right behind you. Wink. Imagine you take the time to build a nice bridge to cross a pesky river. That's a nice bridge right there. But it suddenly gets washed away by a rush of water because rivers, am I right? Oh toots, you say, slapping your knee, but you don't let it get you down just yet. You can rebuild, and so you do, but damn it! Looks like something really doesn't want you building a bridge there. The gods? A nature spirit? Poor structural integrity from a lack of engineering experience? Whatever the case, you're left with no choice. You have to reliably cross that river. It's time to start sacrificing! Japan is no stranger to odd practices to appease spirits, and Hitobashira is one of them. Translating to human pillar, the practice was used to basically bless new construction projects with good fortune. Dang, this project is 3 weeks behind schedule. Well, in you go, Martha. Sir, the budgets have just been coincidentally increased. It's a miracle! It was a common belief that disturbing the earth for means of construction would piss off the local spirits around the land, cursing the structure to an untimely demise. Well, that's not so great for the portfolio's ROI, so builders needed some insurance that their castles and bridges were going to at least have a few centuries of durability against some spooky specters. Victims, or volunteers, would be handpicked to sacrifice themselves to serve this greater purpose. In their sacrifice, they would become a guardian spirit for the structure, protecting it from natural elements or enemy attacks. To be honest, I'd give up my life so a Denny's could serve for all eternity. Famous sites that use some human reinforcement are the Maruoka Castle in Sakai and the Matsuejo Castle in Matsue. Those being sacrificed would be provided a small, comfy hole in which to be buried alive, forever entombed under or near the new construction. The practice was common up until the 16th century when people started to realize, yeah, that makes no sense, and declared it inhumane. Although there is evidence that the practice continued up to the 20th century. I guess some traditions just don't die, but the people do. Mayans. Probably the first thing you think of when you hear human sacrifice in your everyday conversations. Decapitation, ripping out hearts, throwing people in pits, they had it all. Dating as far back as 250 AD, the Mayan people were big on human sacrifice as an ultimate offering to the gods if they really wanted something dire, be it fertility to save them from famine, or rainfall to save them from drought. The unfortunate thing is that droughts and famine eventually subside naturally, so the Mayans never got a good feedback loop that their sacrifices were in vain. They really just kept doing it until their problems were solved, and to their credit, there was definitely no lack of imagination on how to lower their population density either. Those eligible for the privilege of getting sliced and diced onto the village charcuterie board were typically high-value prisoners of war from rival societies, as they were seen as a better offering to the gods. These smelly, unpopular captives would typically be forced into labor, building all of the structures that their friends just died for. Oh yeah, ritualistic offerings were also performed for things like new construction or appointing a new ruler. Nothing like breaking ground by shoving the shovel into your buddy's skull. Thanks, gods. The main goal of sacrifice was to extract blood from their victims as tribute. Of course, getting your sacrifice to bleed was the easy part, but Mayans like to put on a good show. Lobbing heads off, ripping their still beating hearts from their chests, and chucking their bodies down a bunch of steps, slamming numerous arrows into their chests, simple cutting and draining, all very effective at getting that sweet red good out from their bodies. The blood was often smeared across images of the gods that they wished to appease, with the remaining blood and corpsey bits burned to complete the tribute. In case you were wondering, Aztecs performed very similar sacrifices, though a bit more grand. For example, during the reconsecration of the Great Pyramid of Tenochtitlan, it is estimated that more than 80,000 prisoners were sacrificed, reducing crime rate 143% overnight. Even though we are grateful every day for the invention of olive oil, Greece has a pretty dark history. When times were looking grim thanks to the usual suspects of famine, war, or plague, it was deemed necessary to make a sacrifice to purify the community. Roughly translating to scapegoat, pharmakos was the ritualistic sacrifice or exile of a person or group of people. Those typically chosen for the task were slaves, cripples, or criminals. You could even be chosen if you were just plain ugly. Those people were seen as impure and a blight on their society, thus causing all of the misfortunes. Tomatoes not growing right? Just blame Nasty Nick down the road. Yeah, he's guilty. The ritual can go one of two ways. Either the victim is completely sacrificed, or is just exiled. Typically, full-on sacrifice was reserved for the worst of criminals, where they could just be thrown off a cliff into the sea or burned on a pyre. Although it has to be said that many modern history dorks say this probably never happened, so who knows? There are stories from Athens that each year during a harvest festival called Thargelia, the ugliest man and woman would be well fed and paraded through the city. This is nice. But then they would just get absolutely demolished with sticks and branches and kicked out of the city. Well, that's what you get for ruining my tomatoes. Marriage can be one of the happiest moments in a person's life. You dedicate the rest of your life ensuring prosperity, safety, and care for your partner. But what happens once till death do you part becomes reality? Why, you sacrifice yourself, of course. Back around 320 AD, Hindu women would often opt into the practice of sati, in which they would sacrifice themselves to the funeral pyre of their recently deceased husbands. This was seen as an ultimate sacrifice and a sign of utmost devotion as they would follow their loved ones into the spirit world. The grieving widows would either softly lay next to their dearly departed or 720 laser flip their way onto the funeral pyre as it burned, which was pretty metal. As time went on, women became a little bit more reluctant to just throwing themselves willy-nilly into fire because, maybe they wanted to live instead? But thanks to good old societal pressures, these women were more or less forced to the flame. Widows who had no children were seen as nothing but a burden on society since they could not remarry and therefore had no further use. According to a website I found when researching this, the practice of sati was highest between the 15th and 18th centuries, with as many as 1,000 widows blazing it each year. I mean, I've heard of hot single women in my area, but this is ridiculous. Thankfully, the practice was officially banned in 1829. So there you have it. Societies have gone through a lot of sacrifices throughout history and still do even today. For example, I sacrifice my time making these videos trying to convince you that I'm funny, and you sacrifice your time confirming that I'm not. But hey, that's showbiz, baby, so click here and watch some more chat history. I'll see you there.